Anthony, when did you become interested in aviation?
Yeah. So at a very young age, probably like third grade, I had actually a helicopter flight. It was like a tour over the Blue Ridge Mountains there in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and with the exception of that, and then my flight two basic training, that was the only flights I'd ever had my whole life. But I knew in that moment, in some way, shape, or form, that aviation would take at least a pretty good size of my life, and that's what I wanted to do. And um, yeah, pretty much had my first flight, probably actual gunship flight, 10 years into my career, and after that first engagement, man, never looked back. So
Good stuff. So, why did you want to join the US Air Force? And once you joined, can you talk us through some of your training that you went through?
yeah, so my dad gave me the typical dad to son talk there. When I was 17, about to turn 18, right? Like, like you're a man now, you need to get a job, go to college, or get out, and basically I was like, man, I don't want to go to college, and I was like, man, like, I'm gonna look into the Navy first, and then the guy was talking about being on a boat for 6 months, then the Army, and then finally I was like, I talked to my dad about the the Air Force and the quality of life of the Air Force, and he was about 4 years in there, MacDill Air Force Base, and this was way before I was born, but he talked about that, sort of the TDY and the golf clubs and all the good chow hall food, stuff like that, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try this, man, and made a decision, man. And I was like, man, I'm gonna make this decision and stick with it no matter what happens, and July 18th of 2000, man, I was on my flight to San Antonio to basic training. And then my first 5 years of the Air Force, I was what you call a weapons loader. It calls load toads, and I loaded the. This is before 9/11. I got to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, and loaded the Strike Eagle F-15E
Nice.
as a weapons loader there, and I basically did that for 5 years, and there was some assignments with that. That's basically it's a way of saying like the guy that loads the bombs and missiles on the aircraft. And I went to Korea for about a year, and then back to
Nice.
Tyndall Air Force Base, loading the C's and D's and the training squadron, the fighter squadrons down there. And the whole time I was sort of thinking about like, man, like 9/11 had happened, and like I was intrigued by the firefighters, the 343 that ran in that building that day when everyone else ran out, and what's different in their DNA, like man, those guys really test their metal, man. They just the American spirit with that, and I was going to be a firefighter, so I did aircraft firefighting there for 5 years at Charleston Air Force Base, and um, probably saw like three structure fires, but that's a good thing, right? And everything on base is so fire safe. But after 5 years of that, man, I'm at a crossroads again, and I'm at a pizza parlor with my best friends back home on leave, and then I look out on the road, man, and I see the same cracks in the road, and basically same what I'm getting at, same people doing the same thing, and realizing I'd been sitting on the sideline in the whole global war on terror, and I was like, man, I don't leave cracks, I don't leave craters, and then at that point decided, I'm gonna fly on the AC-130 gunship as an aero gunner, and craters, we definitely got to leave a few of those. So, like I said, after that first real deployment in the gunship, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
And was it like a hard transition going from that to the AC-130?
Yeah. So as a firefighter, I was in decent shape, going into it. There definitely was like some hard moments even before you start flying. You have there was aircrew fundamentals, the very basics of how an aircraft flies, and center of gravity, stuff like that. And as an enlisted guy, things I'd be worried about. And then I went to basic aero gunner, which was like a 3 week course, and it was basically, hey, you could possibly operate the 40 mil Bofors cannon, the 105 howitzer, or if you're on the helicopter, the minigun, and the Gallatin 50 cals. And then that was about total months for that, like 2.5 months, I guess, for all that together. Then I went to survival school up in Fairchild, Washington, and man, that was I tell people it was some of the best training I ever had in my life, but I don't ever want to do that again. Yeah, the SEER school up there, and then I went back to Pensacola Naval Air Station, I believe it was, for the back then they did the water survival out there, and like a hanging harness, basic parachute us into the Gulf type thing. We had to survive like 4 hours, so it wasn't bad. And then finally, I got to Cannon Air Force Base, and back then was the 551st Special Operations, like the training squadron. And you have about 3 to 4 months of academics before you even touch the aircraft.
Wow.
And then then finally after that, I think it took about approximately 17 actual like basic flying, and then like tactical sorties to get to get qualified. And then pretty much right when I was qualified, 3 weeks later, I found myself in Afghanistan there in the fall of 2011. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get onto that. But if you can give our viewers an overview of what the AC-130 was, I'm guessing A stands for attack. Am I correct there? Or
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. The A and AC-130. So A would be attack and C would be cargo. And what the Air Force did, back in Vietnam, what was cool about the H model gunship was, I get to fly on the same gunships that were in Vietnam, like, tail number 697 call signs like Gravedigger, Wicked Wanda. And, what the Air Force did was they took this cargo plane and they put basically the 40 mil was a Navy anti-aircraft, weapon. And we hung it on the side of the gunship. And then also the 105 howitzer, like if you put a tank on the side of a cargo plane, man, and you're doing what we call a pylon turn. And, there's some benefits to that. There's a lot of loader time. We can stay overhead the operation a long time. And the whole mission behind that, the gunship, it would be to, provide that, timely, precise, close air support for those unconventional forces. So, your SEALs, your Green Berets, etc.
so, how many crews were like generally on an AC-130? Was it like a standout? I don't know. Let's just say 8 people, or could you mix and match all for different missions?
Yeah, yeah. So back then we had 13 crew members, and then nowadays you're looking at about 7. On the AC-130J, the Ghost Rider. And it's what's cool about it though is it's all crew resource management. All the communications, and back then it was an awesome sight to see. You see 13 people working together in this sort of organized chaos fashion. To get those rounds out, and we would get up to 10 rounds per minute. With a 105, it doesn't sound a lot, but if you could imagine being on the other end of basically a tank shooting at you 10 rounds per minute from the air, right? Like, it was an awesome sight to see. So a lot of crew coordination, and there's 4 gunners usually operating the 105 when we're getting that many rounds out.
I'm guessing, did you always, before you went to Afghanistan, would you stick with one crew or would you mix and match all the time?
So we would mix and match up until at least in my experience, the deployment part, and then once you got deployed, that was what you call your hard crew, and a lot of that's like there's so many hours you can get within a certain time frame. I think it was like 330 hours within 90 days, and then it was really hard to get that waiver because they have to sit you down if you hit that 330 mark. But yeah, so basically everybody had the same hours, and then you would have a planning cycle. Like back then we'd fly 3 weeks, and then you'd have a week of planning, which means pre-flights, weight and balance, hold, things like that. Have the aircraft ready to go in case of like an alert type, troops in contact situation.
I'm going to jump forward because we did get like a viewer question here. What was it like firing the gun for the first time? And I'm guessing it was probably in training. What was that like?
Yeah, I actually put that exact moment in the book there. We went to a well. First of all, let me paint a picture here. So my first flight, man, on the AC-130 was so bad to where like the instructor said something to the effect of like, "Man, you're the reason they have to brief seatbelts on airliners." Like it went that bad. And he and he basically he's like he saw me licking my wounds or whatnot. My head was spinning. I was trying to figure out life at that point, and all these different comms going off, stuff like that. And he's like, he's like, what's the most important word in the dictionary? I was like, man, I don't know, And he's like, perseverance. And he's like, I want you to think about that, before your next flight, and be ready to go and let me know what it means and be ready to perform next flight. And sure enough, man, next flight, we got to go do the live fire here at Jockey and Spirit Range near Melrose Range and near Cannon Air Force Base. And, this moment where the pilot, whips that perfect, 3-mile orbit around the target, and, he's getting on the rate and coincidence. And then that 105, when you see it recoil up to 49 inches and the whole plane shifts a little bit, like,
Oh, really?
I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, man.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously you mentioned Afghanistan there. So what was your first time like being deployed, and did you feel ready and up for the task?
Yeah, the training really kicks in. I'll say that. My first deployment, it was started off really slow, and then we'd been a month or 2 without even shooting. A lot of just overhead operation, and I get it. Like these are all jobs like you never want to really have to do. Before working, somebody's having their worst day or possibly last day. Meaning the guys we're supporting. But at the same time, you want to be the guy that if that someone's back's against the wall, you want to be the guy to get the rounds out for them. That's just the aviator, me, and the gunner and me. And then finally, basically we had landed from one op, and we shot the tweak rounds, which you're looking at a few rounds, just like when you line up your weapon, like an M4, for example. Like you have to spend a few rounds to get your sights in. And it's the same thing with the gunship. I was loading the 105. The few rounds we had shot, and we had landed, and the pilot comes back to the gun deck, and the problem was, so the sun was coming up, and there was a reason we didn't fly in the daytime. It takes a waiver for all that and a lot of different things. But he's like, hey, there's a Green Beret team that's pinned down. I believe it was like northeastern Afghanistan somewhere, and he's like, who's with me? And our own, everybody in the crew and our own version said, send me, and an hour and a half later, we're over this, if that, over this operation, and we get overhead, and so believe it or not, there was a beanbag like a people sit in like chair, where we had back in the day, the H model had the 20 mil, the two 20 mil ports. So where those windows are now, or where I would sit on that beanbag, and I was looking overhead, and we're in this bank, and daylight's coming up, and I just see the RPG flashes from from three Taliban guys, and what it was they had explosive packs on, and they were shooting the Green Berets with the RPGs and Dishka, stuff like that, and then we lit them up with a 40 mil, man, and I remember in that moment, like I think it was like 64 rounds, like my life had changed forever, and I was like, man, I've done more for my country in an hour and a half, 2 hours than I had done my whole life, and that was that moment was what I lived for the rest of my life.
And so I'm quite interested in this. So why wouldn't they send in, let's say, an Apache to do that job, or a Harrier that can do CAP? Why would they send in a big, like cargo plane? Obviously, it's armed to the nines, but why the AC-130?
Yeah. So the quantity of rounds and the loader time, like we had back then, it was 100. So 100 rounds of 105 high explosive. Then we had like 25 of the proximity rounds.
Right.
And then basically we're in this orbit, so we can keep our eyes on targets, padlocked on certain, targets, if you will.
Yeah. And
just the loader time, and then get that many rounds out as long as those guys need it, for at least 4 or 5 hours until we have to go get gas. And then, it was basically loader time and just the amount of firepower and the quantity of firepower.
Yeah, and obviously the C-130 is a very reliable aircraft. It's gonna fly. It's like a tank, isn't it?
Yeah. I've heard it often referred to as God's chariot. Four fans of freedom. What's another one? Puff the Magic Dragon was what they called it in Vietnam, because if in the daytime, if you look up in the air in the daytime, if the 105 goes off, you see this this cloud of smoke every few seconds, and it's that's where that name comes from.
Well, I'm sure you've got probably a few memorable stories, but if you can share a few from your time on AC-130 in theatre, that would be great for us, Anthony.
Yeah. So the Afghanistan, if I remember right, the operations were really like there's really two types of gunship missions. There's the ones that are planned, and you're going on this operation you've studied, and you have all these products, and there's usually some sort of, they're going after a guy on the ground, some heavy hitter, right, and HVT, and you basically have a time on target, time on station. Everything's all planned out to the T, and those guys, seconds matters, and they'll usually, sometimes you'll be there as like insurance, right, and then some nights, they'll breach a door and the whole hornet's nest is mad, and you see them running out the back, and they'll just clear us to engage. And then there's the other moments. I remember back then we had a pager in Afghanistan. I believe it or not, a pager. It was like 2011, and certain numbers meant different things, and you would get alerted, and we had to be off the ground, and I think it was N plus 30, but we would, notification plus 15 minutes, realistically, we'd be off the ground on our way to the troops in contact. And, there was always these moments where, like, you'd be so many miles out, and the sensors start picking up these guys, and, once they hear your noise signature and the props, like I was sort of talking about, those four fans of freedom, they know it's over, and they start running like bees, and, we just clean them up.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an incredible aircraft. And are you still tight with the people you flew with in theatre?
Oh yeah, 100%. I actually do the flight simulator stuff here at Cannon Air Force Base and run the iOS. And basically what that means is I build the scenarios, and I get to see the same guys that, men and women I get to fly with, a few of them at least still around in the simulator. So it's cool, and obviously social media, any way I can keep up with them, I definitely do.
Before we get onto the Pave Hawk, your time on that aircraft, but what would you say the strengths and weaknesses of the AC-130 were, or are?
So I would say speed we're a slow platform, which, we have to keep ourselves safe with that, from different threats and stuff. And so we're a slow moving platform. And at the same time, there's this golden gunship rule where, like, if you're shooting, expect to be fired upon. Like, it's an unwritten rule. It happens, and they'll hear your noise signature at night, and you'll see like air bursts at like your 6 o'clock or where, especially with ISIS, some of that was going on, and then the strength would be like loiter time and just the accuracy of just everything. We can walk rounds in, we can get them as close as we can, and then there's the danger close shoots that they use us for a lot for those because you're getting basically there's a risk with that the ground force commanders he's taking that risk and giving you his initials, signing off on that. With that is, we have a saying where the joint term air controller, he controls the rounds, the guy's calling it on the ground, and then we own the switches. So there's always these decisions that have to get made between, back then from the pilot all the way back to the 13th crew member, the gunners in the back. And, a lot of times there's not a lot of time for conversation, but we have to make this not a right and wrong decision, not a black and white, but either safe or unsafe decision.
I've heard like many times of crews on Herc, sorry, that there's no rank there. It's like you're all one team. Is that true with the US Air Force as well in the AC-130 community?
That is 100% accurate, especially for the AC-130. There is that saying, "There's no rank on the aircraft," and everybody's input matters. And that's what was cool about it. It was like a family. It was, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the aircraft commander, the A code, he or she has all the responsibility. When if something goes wrong, unfortunately, but at the same time, we're a crew aircraft, and they do their best to get everybody's involvement, everybody's thoughts as much as they can before we start getting rounds out.
And also, what was the difference between the H and the W as well? What's the differentiator there?
Yeah. So the H model, back then it was we didn't pressurize. That would be a big difference there. So we were always on the oxygen mask at certain altitudes, and we had the 40 mil Bofors and the 105. And then when I went to the whiskey platform, that was we had the 30 mil. I'll just go over the whiskey block 10. It was a 30 mil, and then we had the Griffins in the back of the aircraft, like on the cargo ramp, and then we had some SDBs on the wings, on the pylons. And so at that point, we're turning this gunship into like a bomb truck, with guns.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then now then the whiskey, the block 20 had the 105 additional to that. They brought that back, and then the J has all those mentioned on the whiskey and then some.
So how many hours did you get on the Herc?
So it was close to 2,000
Wow.
for the between the H and the W, and then I think it's like 700 for my helicopter, 750, something like that.
So let's talk about the Pave Hawk. Obviously, you moved on to that. Was that like a natural progression? Did you choose to go there, or were you assigned there?
Yeah. I chose it. There was a Manning shortage, if I remember right, and I always wanted to sort of be a traditional door gunner, like a Vietnam era, the whole 9 yards thing, stuff like that. And so I jumped on that opportunity, and I'll be honest, man. When I went from fixed wing to rotor wing, you look at a helicopter, like, how's this thing even fly? There's things like the tail rotor, right, provides that 2.5% of lift. All this stuff I didn't know, and you're also learning to be an engineer and an aero gunner. And basically, man, it was very rough, but once I got it, I got it. There's a funny moment in the book there where it was my recommendation ride before my check ride, and I was on a minigun. Ironically, the instructor reached out to me yesterday about the book, and we got a laugh out of it. But I threw up on this guy, man. So like yeah. So I'm in a minigun pattern, and there's certain things that they can like bend the tips of the 7.62 in the minigun sort of to induce a malfunction. And so they're giving you hell. You're clearing out these malfunctions, getting the gun back online, shooting it. And I was so fixated, like underneath my NVGs, working the malfunction that I didn't keep my scan up and keep my eyes on something on the ground every now and then to keep that nausea away and stuff like that. They teach you. And I was like, man, I got to puke, man. And I had my mask on, and
Oh,
I
no.
like and the door was open to where he was sitting in the back evaluating me, and I was like, what, like that? And I thought it would go outside the aircraft, but fun fact, it goes back in the helicopter there to the side. It just, fragged him out good. But yeah, just to paint a picture, I struggled, man. But then my check ride, I did really well on that. And he was proud to see me get back up, man.
Yeah, was that a case of beer fine right there?
Yeah, I think it was like an all-subs burrito or something like with green chili. It was bad, man.
Yeah. So was I guess that Pave Hawk, was that generally the same role? Was it like essentially like close air support as well, or did it have other roles to mix in with that?
Yeah, so the CASEVAC and the PR missions, personal recovery, is that's primarily the mission of the 41st Rescue Squadron and the Jolly Greens, right? The legendary Jolly Greens, which gets its name from back in Vietnam when they were rescuing someone, they would land in the rice paddies with with two helicopters, and when they left, by the time they got somebody and got out, it would look like two green feet print were on the rice paddies there. I got to work and fly and fight beside the best men and women and the best PJs in the world.
And what was the aircraft like? Quite reliable, even the weapons on my board. Did you feel like safe in that environment?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you never really feel like too safe on a helicopter because you're so low and you're so out in the open. And I'll go over the CASEVAC in a minute, but yeah, there's malfunctions. You could have runaway guns, you could have hydraulic leaks, you could have all these different things happen in a very like a minute is what happened to us.
So yeah, like Anthony, can you share a few stories? Obviously, you meant Cassavac there, so if you can share a few stories from your time on the Pavehawk.
Yeah, so the one that stands out the most and means the most to me is June 8th of 2018. We were in East Africa, and what it was we were standing by 7 days there for basically there was 40 special operators and then a lot of partner nation guys, and it was 7 days out of a 7 day 24/7 like coaching. So one of those things where you can sleep when you can sleep, eat when you can eat, and I remember I went to the talk and everything seemed to be going well, and I was like, I'm gonna go take a tactical nap. And literally right when I got on the bunk bed, I hear the infamous tension on that scramble, 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 and that we got alerted. I ran probably a quarter mile to the helicopter, which seemed like a mile at the time, but I get there and we get the aircraft started cocked, so we take off, and I remember we were in like a right hand bank, and the left gunner, he's a really experienced guy, he really right that day, but he had a worn steer notch on the 50 cal, if I remember right, and I could see the round because he had it down at the ground. I could see the round impacts from the 50 cal.
Wow.
At first I'm like, man, like somebody shooting us already, and then I had pulled the flare pins, which that keeps us protected from IR, surface to air threats. And what had happened was that we there was a panel that got to rainwater in there, and it shorted out our CMS system, and so simultaneously we had a runaway gun on the left. I pulled the flare pins. You could literally feel the heat from all of jetting all of our flares. Eyebrows left after that, and then the comms with the communications with the JTAC was like intermittent. It was cutting in and out. I'm piecing together what sounds like a 5-line, like close air support, like I would hear on gunships, and it's really rare for a rescue platform to do provide close air support with 50 cal. And we get there about a 15-minute flight till we get there, and then what it was there was 12 guys in a tree line that had been shooting the special operators with mortars and dishka, the whole 9 yards, and lighting them up, man. It was a bad day. It was pretty nasty CASEVAC, and we do about 4 gun runs, and we had all 4 between lead and trails, all 4 of our 50 cals on the tree line there with the bad guys, and the JTAC marked it with a purple smoke. And finally, we're lead, so we come in and we grab 3 cat alphas, meaning that there's the golden hour. You have an hour to get them back. They have a higher probability of living. And the PJs bring in the first American is in the 5th Special Forces Group, if I remember right. And they put him near the ox tanks. He starts tracheotomy. Then another Green Beret like sat beside me, and he had his eye wrapped. I remember that. And he took some frag to the eye, unfortunately. And then a partner nation got shot in the stomach, man. So he was bleeding out his stomach. So we get our 3 cat alphas, and then we take off, immediately go back into another gun pattern, and we start doing more of those, and then trails on the ground getting their 3 cat alphas, and then basically, it seems like it's taking a long time, but it's really not, and so we're like, okay, we're going to give one more gun run, then we got to get this guy back, so we do one more gun pattern, we egress, and we get back, and then I load the 50 cal rounds I had shot, and I reload those, and then do what we call hot gas. So the rotors are turning, we're basically refilling the aircraft. Take back off, and what it was trail had one more, catch up and weight and stuff like that, and so we went into the gun pattern, protecting our brothers on the ground, and they went and got their last cat off. When we got back, and I'll never forget, like the experienced gunner was telling me, he's like, hey, check the aircraft for bullet holes, and I get around, and I get to the front of the aircraft, and I can see on the aircraft commander's face what had happened, and a guy passed away, unfortunately, once he got on the operating table. And I didn't know what sacrifice was that day, man. To
Yeah.
I'd hear these words like honor, duty, sacrifice, and service before self, and I learned exactly what that word meant that day to see that sacrifice, and that's our nation's best. The children on top of men. That was my whole while those years. Make sure those guys get home.
And so let's get on to your book now, Moonchild, because I think, as you mentioned, a lot of your career's in there and experiences. So, yeah, how did the book come about, and did you intend to write this?
So I didn't start off intend to write it. My last year, I'll back up to so my last deployment was my 20th anniversary, and it was to Iraq, and I was back on gunships at this point because I was getting towards the end of my career, and I call it my sunset tour, and it was really slow. Which again, that's a good thing if we're not working, right? But um, I was like, man, this is boring. I want to do my job, right? And I knew the writing was on the wall. I was going to have to get out. 20 approaching 21 years, and I got back and hit the retirement button, and in that moment, I really lost that self of identity, man. That my sense of purpose, my why. The whole what I was getting at earlier, the whole reason for being, especially on the gunship, is to make sure like there's letters from Rangers, etc., in the squadron there where like this guy's holding his baby girl, and he's like, thanks to you guys, I can go home and see my baby girl, and that's what it was always about for me, and
Yeah.
that sense of relevance was gone, and I ended up what was started out as a weekend drinking habit, ended up being like a nightly pint of hard liquor at least to go to sleep.
Mm.
And then, my wife gives me the ultimatum at one point, like it's either, the alcohol or your daughter, And of course I chose my family, thank God. And what happened was I ended up getting, USOCOM has this thing called the preservation of the force and family. And what that is like you get a psychiatrist, a therapist, a trainer, squadron, you sort of get assigned. And I talked to her, and I was doing the prolonged exposure therapy, and what that is like you get comfortable being uncomfortable, sort of like what we're doing now, like talking about the situation, and
Mhm.
you write your story out, write it out, and then she was like, "You should tell your story." She told me that 100 times, and I said no, and finally, when I get out, man, and I realized like I leave MPF and there's no door handle on the other side of that door when you leave to get out of that office. So you can't get back in, it's sort of like the opposite of Hotel California.
Mhm.
And I was like, man, maybe I could get these words on paper, these sort of, Charlotte's Web of emotional words, and try to make sense of 2 decades of war, and to sort of what my why is going to be now. And what that is like if someone reads this book and gets help, man, that's a victory. That's a win.
Yeah, so did you enjoy the writing process?
Yeah, I really did it. It was a really therapeutic. It was like it even started on like a few scratch sheets of paper, sort of like M&M and like a napkin or something like that. And
Yeah.
I'd wake up in the morning and try to make sense of it. Because what would happen every time I wanted to drink, man, pick up a bottle, I picked up a pen, and I feel like I'm a better man for that. And I think every veteran, every aviator has a story, right? And I think it's important if you have those words in your heart, man, bleed them on the page.
Yeah, so would you say like this is a book for everybody, or would you say it's for a specific group, like people interested in aviation or going through struggles, or can it relate to everybody?
I think it can relate to everyone. I think there's a lot to be said about aviation. You can learn about perseverance. Like the quote, an aircraft takes off against the wind, not with it. And I always go back to that first flight about the word perseverance, and there's an overall theme of perseverance, and it's for really anybody who's ever been through adversity, and wants to get back up. And and the funny thing, symbology about the moon. You can't have light without darkness, and on the darkest nights, man, that's when the moon doesn't get the fog right. That's sort of my theme with that whole book.
Absolutely. So where can we find the book online and yourself also?
Yeah, so you can find a Moonchild, the Roots and Wings of a U.S. Air Force Combat Specialist and Aviator on Amazon, Barnes Noble, anywhere they sell books. If you just Google that, and I can give you some links as well. And then also Great Marker Media, Robbie Grayson, publisher there, and he has a basically easy link. If you go down to the country you're in, for example, like the UK is on there, all these different flags. You click on the flag of your country, and it'll take you straight to the Amazon link.
Great stuff, and that'll be linked in the description below, guys, so go and pick it up. But a couple of light-hearted ones to end this interview here, Anthony. So do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, so I like fishing. I like basketball. Haven't picked up a ball in a while. Probably need to for cardio, but and just honestly, just being a dad, being a husband. That's when I was getting help, the lady was like, basically like, your leg. What's your legacy going to be now? That's what matters. You can't what you've done. Yeah, that was cool and everything, but like, this is your family, your faith, your friends, and your freedom. So,
Absolutely. Could be a tough one, but I think I know the answer. Favorite aircraft you've flown in?
Definitely the AC-130, the Gunship. It was always holds a special place in my heart, and I love the Pave Hawk as well. And just really just the job as aerial gunners, especially as Aviator. Like, I got to fly and fight beside the best men and women, in the Air Force, and just try to make a difference in this world. And I feel like we definitely got the opportunity to do that.
One you would like to fly in, either past or present?
Probably the B-17 would be I couldn't imagine being like the old school gunner on that, the World War II era. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
Did when you were on the AC-130, did the guns ever jam?
Oh yeah. There was especially the 40 mil. There was a lot of different emergency procedures, and that's really where a gunner like makes his money on the AC-130s, is being able to recognize that malfunction, being the weapons expert of the crew, and getting that gun back online. And I know that sounds simple enough, but you could imagine, your brothers and sisters on the ground getting lit up and can't figure out what's wrong with your gun. You don't want to be that guy. So we took a lot of pride in being the weapons expert of the crew, but yeah, there was a lot of different malfunctions you could get, and now there's a 30 mil. You can get a lot on that as well.
Will there be any more books in the works?
100%. Yeah, I got a project now, sort of grassroots, but I'm definitely working on a book, and I'm actually in the process of trying to create this basically like a hub, a website for for anybody of these type of jobs, right? And veterans, aviators, stuff like that. And if you have a story to tell that where you could get your sort of nonprofit for like a heavily discounted or even free, published and edited, that's a too big project somewhere right now.
Well, guys, all the links will be in the description below. But Anthony, thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing a bit about your story and your new book, Moonchild. So, yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Mike. It was a privilege. Thank you, brother.
Cheers.